Здравствуйте, уважаемые студенты, родители, гости. Сегодня в преддверии Дня карьеры в Международной гимназии Сколково, которого пройдет 26 ноября, подробная информация будет в чате на канале YouTube. Я рада приветствовать вам Дарью Лаврентьеву, руководителя международных образовательных проектов отдела культуры и образования при посольстве Великобритании в Москве, которая представит наших спикеров и расскажет, о чем сегодня мы с вами поговорим. Дарья.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо за интерес к профессиям, к теме профессии будущего. Это, безусловно, очень актуальная тема, и я рада приветствовать наших спикеров. But I will give some introduction in English. So I would like to welcome to the session Professions of the Future. How does technological progress change our lives? And what technological changes can we expect in our future? So this session is devoted to the role of artificial intelligence, digitalization of society, innovative research, and this series of online events with academics of UK universities is organized by the Cultural Education section of the British Embassy in Moscow for selected Russian schools. And we're very glad to welcome all school students, parents, and of course teachers and IB programs representatives here with us. The event is organized as a part of the biggest online fair of UK Education Study UK. The fair is a great opportunity for you to meet 45 UK universities and to get all the useful tips and to book one-to-one consultancy with your selected university. So this session will last for about 40 minutes and it is being recorded. Please write your questions to our speakers in the comments section under the video. And we will monitor all the questions and we will ask them for you to the speakers. So now I would like to give a short introduction about our speakers today. We have Dr. Anthony Wiliams. He's a senior lecturer of the Department of Computer Engineering and Computer Science on Information Technology and Information Technology Specialist. He's head of the Business Intelligence and Data Mining, and he's a Microsoft specialist, winner of the SOAS Academic Award. He's a scientist analytic, and he is a synthetic chemist and chemoinformatics, who he uses IT skills to solve lots of problems of the industry. And Funmi Obembe, Dr. Funmi Obembe is a senior lecturer in the Department of Information Systems, Faculty of Computer Engineering and Media, School of Computer Science and Informatics, with over 18 years of experience in the industry. She has a deep knowledge of data analysis, and she is a specialist in knowledge in algorithmics for knowledge representation and management. We have speakers today from the Montfort University. It is a university located just 1 hour away from London, and it is one of top 150 young universities in the world, according to the Times Higher Education 2020 and also ranking. And also it is one of top 10 universities in the UK for the quality of programs in business accounting, finance, engineering, and many more. 70% of the research of the university was recognized as a world leading, and the quality of teaching of the university has earned an award gold. So students really appreciate studying in this university, and I'm very happy to hand this over now to Anthony. Anthony, it's your turn now.
Okay, let me just get set up. He says. I have a problem. He used to not have a problem. I can't get Zoom up for, just wait a minute.
Okay, probably.
So I can see you. Okay, now I'm there. Share screen.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So all the students, parents, teachers. So I'm very happy to hand this over to Anthony. He will share his screen now and will give much more information, a lot of information useful about the professions of the future and innovations and technological progress and artificial intelligence as well. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Okay, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to talk about innovation and DMU and some aspects of my working career. If I kind of wind the clock back 30 years ago, I'd be where you are sitting today, wondering about how I'm going to make my mark in the world. And I wasn't as wise as you guys are today. And there's a lot more information around today that makes life a lot more interesting. So I'm going to make this personal. I'm going to talk about my career in innovation and technology. And I'm going to talk about the advances that have happened in my lifetime and give you an idea about what might be happening now and how things might affect you in your working career. So who am I? Well, thank you for that introduction. I'm a senior lecturer at Montfort, specialised in the subject of data analytics. Before that, I've worked in industry for over 20 years, a career in life science, specialty chemicals. And perhaps this is also testament to the new world, is I've had many roles all based upon the qualifications that I came out with and the skills that I learned as I went along, from an organic chemist making materials and chemicals to a database administrator, information manager, a patent searcher, a business analyst. So I actually designed and built chemical information management systems to store and retrieve data, and then to use that data for predicting properties of new materials. I've worked in big pharma, chemical companies, Boots in the UK, Merck Sharp Dome, they're a US company, and also ASI, they're a big Japanese company. But I've also worked in innovation into two startups from Oxford and Cambridge University. One which was incredibly successful, which was listed on the FTSE 100, raised £100 million, is now part of Evitech. That's still going. And then the other one was Cambridge spin out from their pharmacology department, their drug design group, and that was called De Novo Pharmaceuticals. That was quite an exciting time in my life. I was there for about 8 years, and unfortunately that wasn't as successful as Evitech, but did lead me on to other things. I've not spent any time in Russia, unfortunately, although my partner has spent some time in the Mendeleev Institute in Moscow a long time ago, when the world was very different than it is today. Around 2010, I moved back into academia, and I've been involved in the recruitment and selection of applicants for the MSc in data analytics. And I have research papers in the field of drug design, which is a very innovative area, and also a research interest in perhaps a slightly different area of health and diseases of honeybees. So I just introduced this idea of a paradigm shift. And okay, a paradigm shift is a word that's used an awful lot at the moment, but a paradigm shift is basically where people develop new ways of thinking and new opportunities arise. It perhaps doesn't apply to our current state of mind, where we're on the cusp of the what we call the fourth paradigm, in using big data and analytics to actually further science. In my working career, I was perhaps in the third paradigm of using computational science tools to push science forward. But you know, these are incremental changes from the medieval days, when we started to actually have some concrete experiences on the basis of experimentation and science. So one of the problems with big data is I don't think it quite fits in terms of a paradigm, because the rules aren't simple. In fact, it enables you to deal with more complexity and the richness of the physical world. But you'll often see this word paradigm shift. Paradigm shift usually results in a new technology that's being implemented and adopted. In my lifetime, you know, if I look back over 30 years, it's really difficult to predict how things would have gone. Predicting what will happen tomorrow, next week, next year is a lot easier. There's really just too much uncertainty in the world, and these paradigm shifts can sneak up on you. Technology changes appear fast, but actually they're imperceptibly slow. There are lots of incremental improvements that converge and combine together to cause big changes. Often they're driven by hard problems that we as humans try and do, you know, like put satellites into orbit, try and solve the human genome. You know, in my lifetime, we've seen changes that gone all the way from computers that were in big rooms to having one in my pocket. Having said that, people's needs don't change. We still need food, we still need water, we still need housing, energy, leisure, and work. So, you know, often technology supports these endeavors, but if you boil it down to the basics of what we need, those things are kind of immutable. In order to understand technology, you kind of need to understand why it's difficult for technology to be adopted and how things sneak up on you. And what this slide is trying to show you is we've got, and on the vertical axis, we've got basically adoption of technology. So you can think of how many people are using it, and your population could be the world if you want. On the x-axis, we've got time. Now, what's not talked about and what's not realized is we've got something called the chasm, or the gap. So before the gap, we've got people who are inventors, innovators that are trying new stuff, often before there's an established market need, and they have a vision of where they want to be. But in order to make their products and ideas commercial, they have to jump this gap where they have to create a market, they have to make their products reliable, they have to make their products cheap, and they have to scale them up. And that requires hard work. And that's why it's called the chasm, and there's a gap. Once you hop over that gap, then you get early adopters that start to use these things in their business, and then they peak, and then the technology is mature, and it gets to the point where you wonder how you could have lived without it. From a commercial area, we've got these ideas of this is from the Boston Consultancy Matrix, but these are basically a way of identifying products that create revenue for your business, essentially, or your new business. It's a product matrix. And so question marks are actually early on in the early days, and they become dogs if we spend too much time and resources and we can't cross that chasm. But if we can cross that chasm, then these question marks, these new ideas become what we call product stars. They represent massive growth, massive income, massive value, and then eventually they become cash cows. And if we don't put a lot of effort into innovating and keeping up with the pace of technical change, they'll eventually fall into this area of what we call poor dogs. So in essentially, we're putting too much resource in and they don't generate a lot of revenue, and we should basically weed them out of our product portfolio. And this is just to indicate where people might be in this technology life cycle. Following that, we've also got something similar related to the hype cycle. So we have a technological trigger or an idea, a desire of what we want to do. Then there's a lot of expectation, a lot of publicity about the wonderful things that we might be able to do today. So an example of that would be autonomous vehicles. There are a few examples around, but not everyone is driving them. Then the press finds out and people die, and there's a huge amount of money that's spent on it. And then we go through what we call the trough of disillusionment. So that's what was a promising technological idea, but then it's got to go through this period of pain. When it comes out the other side, we have technology that's cheap, that's reliable, that's robust, and proven to be safe, and incrementally improves. And then we end up with what we call the plateau of productivity. So both those two ideas are about essentially models of technology. Quite often as consumers, we see a lot of this trough of disillusionment, and the slope of enlightenment is difficult to see. And this is the bit that creeps up on us before we realize there's been an improvement to our life through the use of an adoption of technology. So I want to take you back 50 years. So I want to give you a case study of going through this kind of cycle. So if we go back 50 years ago, there's a guy called Cyrus Linthal who discovered this idea of, or worked on this idea of trying to visualize structures in a computer. On the right, we've got Crick and Watson, who discovered the structure of DNA in 1953. In order for them to get their insights, they had to build these models in a room. Okay, and that's just a small piece of DNA that they were looking at. They couldn't build the full model in a room. With the possibility of computer-aided drug design, which took 30 years to develop before technology was reliable and cheap enough to have an impact in this field of drug design, it required the development and the convergence of many technologies. I'm going to show you a clip. It's going to last about 2 minutes. But in order for you to appreciate this clip, I'd like you to look at these things. I'd like you to think back to the year 1964, 69. Now, you won't be able to do that, but I'm sure your parents were around at that time, or maybe your grandparents. Or if they weren't, what I'd like you to do is think of the last significant effect in your living memory. Well, or last significant event, wherever that was. Could be the Olympics, I don't know, wherever it is. Just to basically put a timeline on things. I want you to think and appreciate the excitement of the inventor describing his invention. And then I want you to appreciate the 3D structures of molecules. These are things that we just can't see and can't touch. And they become more visceral to us when we can simulate them in the computer, particularly these massive molecules of blood and DNA. So I'm not talking about small molecules like, say, methane gas or carbon dioxide, but things which are really massive. And then I want you to look at the technology. I want you to look at the feel of the interaction that they use. The guy's using a teletype display, which is basically a paper printout, and that's how he interacts with his computer. And then there's also a reference to artificial intelligence. And bear in mind what year we're in. Okay. So I'm just going to show this movie. It might be a bit quiet, but I'll annotate it as we're going along.
To understand how DNA and proteins function, scientists
now this is just a cartoon of cell division, essentially, of DNA replicating, which will then lead into the invention.
At MIT's famous project MAC, it was the first time that interactive computer graphics were used specifically to model molecules. The first three-dimensional vector graphics were generated in 1964 by Cyrus Leventhal of MIT and Robert Langridge of Harvard.
Now these things are hard to visualize because these calculations often happened overnight.
On the crystal ball, there was a stationary picture on the screen, and then as you move this ball, suddenly the object on the screen started moving as if you had it in your hand. It was very exciting. It still is. When you get your hands on these molecules, you feel that you're holding them, a three-dimensional object holding them, whereas in fact, of course, they're in the computer. And nowadays, of course, we're able to manipulate very complex objects in 3 dimensions and view them in stereo on the screen. It's almost as if the object floats in front of the computer in 3 dimensions.
In 1969, Langridge set up his own computer graphics laboratory at Princeton. One structure studied was hemoglobin. Current advances in artificial intelligence and the addition of computer-assisted insight and reasoning allow researchers to give the computer rules with which to manipulate molecules and to treat them as scientists do, like sets of structures and symbols, not simply numbers.
Okay, so that's basically that's a historical record of the hype of 50 years ago, where the technology might go and wasn't realized. And it took 30 years basically for us to work and improve upon and provide a lot of infrastructure and services for that to become and reach its full promise, where we're using computers to help us design drugs. We needed advances in the development of X-ray crystallography. We needed crystal structures to be solved and produced. We needed the coming together and the development of crystal databases that stored those molecules, which weren't around at the time. And then we had the event of the human genome that was solved around 2000, and cloning and advances in biology and chemistry, so that we could create biomolecules, so ligands to target biomolecules as disease targets for drug design. So, in order to make progress in this area, you need databases. It was started in 1971, the Protein Data Bank. However, the number of molecules that were available for us to use at this time were in the tens. It wasn't until the advent of around 2000 that we had lots of protein structures. So protein structures are basically disease targets. Disease targets are what pharmacologists, chemists need in order to design drugs. And up today, so we're about up to 150,000. If you look at small molecules, X-ray crystal structure of small molecules, again, it took advances in technology for us to achieve over 1 million structures, which is where we are today. So those numbers are huge. The data is complex to represent within the computer as well. That's not without its own problems. To give you an idea what that would look like in a computer, this is a human readable form of a file format for a piece of a protein, which is listed basically by the atoms or amino acid sequence and their coordinates. This is a chemical structure of a small molecule benzoic acid. These are 2D coordinates of how the atoms are connected. That's what a standard file format. You need standard file formats in order to make progress in analyzing and moving data. Although today we do have techniques that allow us to look at unstructured data, which Funmi might talk about. Now, to make this real for you, bear in mind that 50 years ago, there's only a handful of people, the inventors, that could do what I'm about to show you that's accessible to you through your desktop and possibly even on your mobile phone. So this will just show you the advances that's happened in this area and the possibilities that's enabled you to do. So I'm just going to change my screen to share my browser. Okay, and what I'm going to show you is this is a protein target for something that's quite in the news at the moment. It's called 3-chymotrypsin-like protease. It's a cysteine protease, and this is involved in the cleavage of proteins. You've got chymotrypsin in your stomach, which chops up peptides into amino acids for food and substance. So it's got something similar. And this might look complicated, but what it's got these alpha helices and beta sheets, which provide a structural building blocks to the protein. And where this ligand sits, so a ligand is basically a candidate drug that you can think about. A drug is more than just a ligand, but we'll just use the word, it's a small chemical molecule that fits in that channel. And the idea is if you block that channel, you prevent this protein from doing its job. Now we can home in on that a little bit deeper in more detail. And this is the active site of that cysteine protease. This is the ligand, and the backbone is the backbone of the protein, which has side chains hanging off it. Now I'm trying to find two that are important. So this is a cysteine, and what's happened here is that this chemical compound is bound to it's an irreversible binding to the backbone. So by using computers and the solving of protein structures, we're able to actually see at a molecular level what's happening. Not only is cysteine involved, but there's also a histidine residue, histidine residue, which would be in this site, which is also involved in the cleavage of peptides. Now, this is, I've added the surface to the protein so you can visualize a bit better what's happening. These are recognition interactions with the backbone and side chains of the protein that lock the compound into place. And then this is the surface of that compound within the protein. And you can see actually there's the channel where a peptide would come in, and there would be like a pair of molecular scissors here that would chop. But now that we've got our ligand in place, we're actually blocking that inhibition. Okay, so that's the end of my quick demo on the technology and innovation. I'd like to hand over to Funmi, who'll talk to you a bit more about the sort of the adoption of these techniques that you've seen in this field, sort of computing power and massive databases and data analytics to further an endeavor which happened to be drug design, but maybe to apply them into other areas of business.
Thank you very much. It's really good to be here with you all. So I'm Funmi Obembe. I'm a senior lecturer in information systems. So I'm going to be talking very briefly about professions of the future. And one of those professions of the future, which is very relevant right now and would be relevant going forward, is the data professional. So I'm going to focus on the data professional. So now, whether you're talking about artificial intelligence, which my colleague Anthony talked about a bit, and artificial intelligence has been around for ages. The phrase artificial intelligence was first mentioned in 1956 at a conference that far back. So artificial intelligence is looking at the simulation of human intelligence in machines. So whether you're looking at artificial intelligence, or maybe you're looking at Internet of Things, which is about interconnected objects being able to collect and transfer data over wireless networks, whether you're talking about data science, which has to do with your interdisciplinary field that uses various methods and algorithms to extract knowledge and insights from both structured and unstructured data, or maybe you're looking at data analytics, which is about analyzing data to draw conclusions, or maybe to machine learning, which is an application of AI, which allows systems to automatically learn and improve from learning without being explicitly programmed. And then, of course, in recent times, we have deep learning, which is being used to do all sorts of innovative things. So your deep learning is a subset of machine learning, where you have artificial neural networks and algorithms inspired by the human brain, and they're learning things from large amounts of data. So for all of this and many more, things that we see in the future right now, and which in the present right now, and which we'll see in the future, it all starts with data. They're all data dependent. So why is data so important? Data is really, really important and key, both now and in the future, because data allows you to draw insights. And insights drawn from data gives businesses, gives organizations, gives sectors the competitive advantage. So if you have an organization or a sector that's able to effectively draw insight from data, they would always have the competitive advantage. And the way that insight is drawn is through getting actionable insights. So that's insights that you can use to do things using analytics. So we use analytics to draw insight from data. And the different types of analytics. Here I've got 3 examples. You've got your descriptive analytics. With your descriptive analytics, what it's telling you is what's happened in the past. And within that, you have diagnostics analytics, which helps you understand why certain things have happened the way they have done. Then you have your predictive analytics, which is all about predicting what's likely to happen in the future. Then you have your prescriptive analytics. And here, what's being done is it's recommending actions that you can take to influence and affect outcomes. So incredibly important. And we'll have a look at some brief case studies on this. But the people who draw out these insights from these analytics are your data professionals. And I have here a subset of some of your data professionals. Now, data professionals are incredibly important today because we have increasing amounts of data. So we've got big data. The phone in your pocket as you walk around is generating data and storing up data. Everything is logging data, is storing up data. So previously, there's always been data around, but the amount of data that are being generated right now is incredible. And that's set to continue. But the great thing about this data is it's not just data being generated for data's sake, but you can draw insights. And it's in drawing insights from this data that you get the competitive advantage when it comes to things like in the health sector. It's in drawing insights from this data that you can help to make progress in this different areas. So some of the examples of data professionals who are in high demand today and for the foreseeable future would continue to be in high demand. You have your data scientist. Now, your data scientist is your analytical data expert. He or she are interdisciplinary. So their work cuts across different disciplines. So they might be part mathematician, part statistician, part computer scientist, able to spot patterns and trends. You have your data analyst who collects, processes, and analyzes data. You have your data engineers who collect and validate data. They create pipelines so that the data is there for the data scientists to come and draw insights from. You also have your AI specialists. Now that covers a broad range of roles, but they're developing AI algorithms and systems in different sectors. You also have your machine learning specialists who design and develop machine learning and deep learning systems. So that's just a subset of them. But all these guys, both in the present and in the future, would continue to be needed, and increasingly so. So a case study looking at predictive analytics in the health sector. Now in this research, AI was applied to predict the likelihood of a patient self-harming or attempting suicide. And what was done was AI algorithms were developed based on several factors, and the subtree that you see on the left here shows you some of those factors. So based on those factors, algorithms were developed to predict the risk level of a patient. Some of those factors were things like emotional state, past and current risk behavior, motivational levels, and so on. But what this model enabled both clinicians and non-clinicians to do was to predict the risk level of a patient. And that meant that because there was that insight, the right decisions could be made about patients. Should a patient be released at this time or not, and so on. The second case study is looking at sentiment analysis of Twitter data. Now, we all know that right now there's COVID and vaccinations are being worked on. But what this project did was collect Twitter feeds, millions of Twitter feeds, which had certain keywords in them. So there were keywords like COVID-19, coronavirus, and then sentiment analysis were done on all these Twitter feeds. Sentiment analysis tries to classify the emotions in statements. So is it a positive statement? Is it a negative statement? Is it a neutral statement? And so this was done on all these Twitter feeds. And then there was some analysis done to see if there were correlations with things that were happening with government announcements and so on at that time. So for instance, the first lockdown, did that have an impact on the Twitter feeds that people were pouring out? And sentiment analysis is used by companies and will continue to be used by companies in really, really innovative ways. So for instance, a company can use sentiment analysis to analyze how their customers are feeling about certain things. And that can help them to make decisions and to do things that would give positive outcomes from their customers. And then the final case study that we have is to do with recommendation engines. Now, recommendation engines are widely used in the retail sector, and you have companies like Netflix and Amazon. And what happens with a recommendation engine in artificial intelligence is that it would suggest products and services to users based on the analysis of data. And this analysis of data produces very, very personalized suggestions. So for instance, if you're on Netflix, you would get very personalized suggestions, which might be based, for instance, on other movies that you've watched, or it might be based on movies that people who have liked other movies that you liked watched. And so you get very, very personalized recommendations. There was an interesting case a few years ago where Amazon was said to be working on algorithms, which before you knew that you needed an item or you wanted an item, you would get this item in the post from Amazon, you pick it up and you think, oh, wow, I didn't know I needed this, but I absolutely need it. And then you pay for it. But those are the kind of things that the future is looking to do. And so as you're at this point where you're exploring what you want to go on to do in the future, my advice is don't just focus on what is needed today, but you need to be thinking about the professions of the future. You don't want to invest your time and your efforts into careers that would not exist in the future. And that's where, if it's an area of interest for you, the data professional is a fantastic one, because the data professional is needed right now, increasingly so, and would continue to be needed for the foreseeable future. So at Montfort University, we have a lot of programs which help equip and develop you into fantastic data professionals who can hit the ground running. And I've put a few of them here on the slide. We have the BSc Honors in Business Data Analytics, the BSc Honors in Applied Computing, Internet of Things, Business Information Systems, Digital Technology Innovations, and we have a host of others. So for those of you who might be interested in a career in data profession as a data professional, it would be amazing to welcome you in the future to DMU. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, if there's anything that you want to check, I've put the email address for our admissions, and I've also put my email address and my colleagues, Anthony's email address. It would be fantastic to see you in the future and to hear from you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Funmi and Anthony. It was really very exciting because we couldn't expect that the technological progress is so well moving forward, and it's so exciting to see these examples. Thank you a lot for them. Just I would like to ask one question. Anthony, could you please tell, probably there are any technologies that we can expect in the nearest future. Is it possible to make any suggestions or, well, to predict what's going to happen? Because some things as having chips embedded or virtual reality that, well, we couldn't even think of now doesn't seem to be so far away going. And could you please predict a bit what's going to happen?
Yeah, sure. Just how long have I got, by the way?
We have about 4 or 5 minutes, actually.
Okay, right. Okay, so I'll share a few slides that I might have. Okay, so you're asking me to predict the next big thing. So that's a fool's errand for all the reasons that I explained earlier. Now, am I sharing my screen? Yes. Okay, so let me present it. Thing that I can predict is that companies will come and go. So the average half-life of a company is about 5 years through merger and acquisitions. People tend to outsource to specialists, but there's also a move to insourcing. Economies go through cycles. They go through up cycles and down cycles roughly every 5 to 7 years. It's no longer normal to work in a company for your life. So be prepared for change and adaptation. Wherever profession you move into, you're likely to be affected by technology. Networks have shrunk the world, and we achieve more with less people, and technology gets cheaper. So I talked about the hype cycle. So this is a hype cycle for some technologies Gartner mentions in 2012. And probably you should look at the things that are 10 years away. This is like 8 years ago. So we've got human augmentation. So that's basically AR, virtual reality, mobile robots, Internet of Things. Okay. And then you've got like near field credit or payments. So that's basically Apple Pay. So those things are kind of, and then we've got these things which are in this plateau of productivity. So these items have actually made it through this trough of disillusionment. Now, this is some predictions that Gartner made last year, and these are some of the things that you can see that are on the horizon. So flying autonomous vehicles, they're 10 years away. It looks like cars, whatever driving level 4 is now getting towards this peak of disillusionment, which is perhaps not surprising because we've now had some deaths reported through some of the autonomous vehicles, that particularly with Tesla, that have been reported in the media. One thing that I find quite exciting, I think, is that the way that we're going to interact with computers is going to change within the next 5 or 10 years. This will mean that people will have to think and will need different skills on how they create and build computer artifacts. So here's one thing that kind of is blowing me away at the moment, and it's got some, and this goes back to my idea of incremental change. So if you go back to 2013, we had something called Google Glass, which was basically a computer projector in some glasses that projected the screen onto the back of your retina and allowed you to interact with the touching the side of the glasses to navigate between pages. So you can overlay your real world with like aspects of what your computer might tell you. So you could interact with your email, with Teams, create documents on the fly, that kind of thing. Now that was very limiting. What's happened, it sort of recent, and this was about £1,000, and this wasn't widely adopted, and this had some privacy issues. Meanwhile, over the last 7 years, this technology has developed a long way, to a huge extent, that we got what we call here augmented reality. So this is basically where my computer world and my physical world are kind of overlapping together. So here we've got a user looking at basically how to service this piece of electrical equipment, and they've set themselves up with a team meeting, and their interface is a virtual interface that's being projected onto the back of their eye, and they're interacting with these display with their hands in space. And oops, and then we had an example of someone playing a piano in space. So we kind of got the ability now to move from the chair. So most of my working life, I've been tied to a chair, a keyboard, and a screen in front of me. With the advent of augmented reality and the use of projection, eye tracking, hand tracking, we're now able to basically interact with these things in our normal environment, where we're not normally stationary, but we're on the move. So I could be on the train, I could be walking down the street, and I could be interacting with my virtual world and doing work out in the field. So I'm no longer tied to an office.
It's absolutely amazing what you're talking about. Actually, it is difficult to assume for those people who are not in the topic of technology that these things really gonna happen so soon. I would like, I'm just sorry because we have a short of time, but I'm sure that if students or anyone who is listening us at the moment have any questions, they have a contact details, and please contact us. We're happy to support you, and we're happy to share the contacts if you have any questions. Anthony and Funmi will be really very happy to answer your questions. I'm really very grateful for your time and this brilliant, absolutely outstanding presentation. We hope that this fantastic technological progress will be our reality really very soon. Thank you so much. Спасибо, друзья. Мы благодарим вас за ваше время и надеемся, что вам понравилась наша презентация. Ждем вас на следующую сессию, посвященную студенческому опыту организации стартапов. Спасибо большое. Оставайтесь с нами. До новых встреч.